The universe had decided Captain Fiora would die of irony. Here she was, commander of the Thelum Alliance medical frigate Saffron Gale, a vessel sworn to pacifism, bleeding out in the great emptiness. Her ship was a testament to life, every system designed to preserve it. Yet now, every system was failing in a cascade of shrieking alarms and dying light panels. The irony was so thick she could taste it, a bitter, metallic taste that coated her tongue like the recycled air.
Status,
she managed, her voice a dry rasp. Her tripartite jaw, hidden beneath a crest of fine peacock blue feathers, clicked audibly. It was a sound her Thelum bridge crew would have recognized as panic, held back by the thinnest thread of discipline. But her bridge crew was gone. There was only Tella, her junior navigator, slumped over a console that sparked erratically.
life support, critical, Captain,
Tella chirped, her own voice faint. Her delicate, feathered crest was matted with sweat.
FTL drive is slack. Sublight engines are offline. We are a rock.
Fiora looked at the main view screen. It showed nothing but the indifferent swirl of a nameless nebula and the stark, terrifying truth of Tella's assessment. They were a rock, a dying rock full of dying people. The ambush by the orate hegemony had been brutally swift and decisive. A symphony of destruction played against the canvas of deep space. The rest of their fleet was vapor and memory. The Gale had only survived by playing dead among the debris.
There is one option,
Tella said, her claws tapping weakly on her screen. The star chart flickered to life. A single system circled in hesitant, pulsing red.
An unlisted system. Old survey data suggest a pre-FTL, possibly nascent industrial civilization. Their technology level is low. Their star is a G-type main sequence, designated Soul. They won't have the technology,
Fiora stated, the words heavy with defeat.
We require gravitic containment and a new FTL coil. They will have nothing of the sort. They won't have the hegemony either,
Tella countered, a spark of defiance in her weary eyes.
Their gravity well is our only chance to decelerate without power. We can broadcast a medical distress call. It is a prayer, Captain. Nothing more.
Fiora stared at the red circle. Soul, a name that meant nothing. A long-shot gamble in a game where all the dice were loaded. A prayer sent into the uncaring dark.
Do it,
she said, the words barely a whisper.
Send the prayer.
A prayer, huh? Mara Solberg grunted, looking at the grainy image of the alien vessel on her datapad. It looked like a wounded bird, all graceful curves and sweeping lines, but pockmarked with ugly plasma scoring and a gaping wound in its port side engine nacelle. Looks like someone answered, and they sent a mechanic. She strode through the cavernous docking bay of Armstrong Lunar Station, her steel-toed boots echoing on the mag-plated floor. The air hummed with industrial life support and the low thrum of the station's spin gravity. Behind her, two figures struggled to keep up, their presence a stark contrast to the sterile environment.
A mechanic, a tech wizard, and a grumpy old man,
a voice chirped. Tina, Glitch, Ito, all of 19 years old and vibrating with enough nervous energy to power a small city, zipped past Mara on a hover dolly loaded with diagnostic gear. Her hair was a chaotic riot of neon pink and electric blue, an affront to the station's muted gray color palette. I ain't old, Sal Pops Braddock wheezed, lugging a heavy-duty toolkit that looked like it had seen service in several small wars. It was dented, scratched, and bore the proud patina of decades of hard work. I'm vintage. There's a difference. And I ain't grumpy. I'm a realist. This whole thing smells fishier than a Glenarchian fish market.
The contract is solid, Pops,
Mara said without breaking stride.
Orbital Authority wants us to assess, repair, and refit.
Standard private contractor gig for situations requiring plausible deniability.
Plausible deniability,
Pops scoffed, his voice a gravelly rumble that seemed to come from the depths of a combustion engine.
That's government speak for, if this goes sideways, we've never heard of you.
Exactly, Mara said, a thin smile touching her lips. It was a smile that didn't reach her eyes, which were constantly scanning, assessing, planning. It also means they don't look too closely at the requisitions, as long as the paperwork is filed in triplicate. Tina?
Already on it, boss,
Tina called back, her thumbs tapping a rapid, intricate pattern on her own datapad.
I've submitted preliminary requests for, structural plating, a secondary plasma conduit, 6 industrial-grade power converters, a full-spectrum comm suite upgrade, and a case of that spicy jerky from the commissary. For morale.
See? Mara said, gesturing back at the hyperactive teenager.
Triplicate.
They rounded a final corner, and the saffron gale loomed before them. It was larger up close, its elegant design marred by the brutal reality of its condition. Station crew in sterile exosuits were spraying sealant over the worst of the hull breaches. A small party of aliens stood near the main airlock, looking frail and overwhelmed under the harsh bay lighting. They were tall and slender, their feathered bodies a stark, organic contrast to the cold metal surrounding them. Their leader, a figure in a captain's uniform that was immaculately clean despite the state of her ship, stood ramrod straight. Her composure was a fortress built on sand. Mara sized her up in an instant, weary, proud, and terrified. "All right," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. "Pops, you're with me. Initial engineering assessment. Tina, find their mainframe. Don't break anything yet."
Define break,
Tina asked, her eyes already bright with manic light as she gazed upon the alien ship's access ports.
If it costs more than your signing bonus to fix, you broke it,
Mara retorted.
Go.
Tina gave a whoop and shot off towards a service umbilical, her hover dolly leaving a faint eye on trail. Mara and Pops headed for the waiting aliens. As they approached, the Thelum captain stepped forward, her posture rigid.
"I am Captain Fiora of the Saffron Gale," she said,
her voice formal, laced with a galactic standard accent that was clipped and exact.
"On behalf of the Thelum Alliance, I extend my gratitude for your assistance. We require repairs to our life support and FTL drive systems. We can offer payment in refined medical-grade silicates."
Mara waved a dismissive hand.
"We'll work out the billing later. I'm Mara Solberg, lead engineer. This is my chief diagnostician, Sal Braddock."
Pops grunted a hello, his eyes already roving over the ship's damaged hull, his expression a mixture of professional disgust and deep-seated pity.
"Looks like you folks met something mean."
"The Oriate hegemony," Fiora said, the name like a curse on her tongue. Mara's face hardened almost imperceptibly. "Yeah, we've heard of them. The glitter fascists, Tina calls them." She clapped her hands together, a sharp, decisive sound. "Right. First things first, my people will set your crew up with temporary quarters. They look like they're about to fall over. We'll take it from here." Before Fiora could protest the sudden, overwhelming takeover of her own ship, another human appeared, pushing a clattering metal cart. He was a man with a warm, open face and a gentle smile that seemed entirely out of place in the sterile, industrial environment of the docking bay.
"Don't mind me,"
he said in a soft, lilting Colombian accent. "Just the morale officer." Fiora found herself being gently but firmly ushered into her own med bay, which was already being transformed. The strange man with the cart was setting up a polished chrome machine that hissed and gurgled. The elegant, sterile scent of Thelum atmospherics was already being brutally replaced by something else. A rich, dark, and utterly alien aroma that smelled of roasted earth and defiant energy. It smelled warm. It smelled like safety.
"I am Mateo Vargas,"
the man said, his hands moving with a fluid, confident grace.
"I was told you were medics under fire."
That's a hard knife. The hardest. He pressed a thick ceramic mug into Fiora's trembling hands. It was filled with a steaming black liquid. Here, this is coffee. Fiora stared at the mug. Coffee, she repeated, the word foreign and strange. She had requested repairs of a starship. She had been given a beverage. She brought the mug to her face, carefully navigating the rim with her tripart beak. The nectar of the gods, Mateo said with a wink. Or, in our case, the fuel that keeps tired people from making fatal mistakes. Drink up. You look like you carry the weight of a whole world on your shoulders. She took a hesitant sip. The liquid was hot, bitter, but with a complex, invigorating depth that seemed to seep directly into her exhausted soul. A warmth spread through her chest, a deep and settling heat that sank into her bones. It was the first moment of peace she'd had in weeks. Meanwhile, in the mangled heart of the Saffron Gale's engineering section, Pops Braddock was having a religious experience. He was covered in grease, lying on his back under a massive honeycombed power conduit, a diagnostic probe in one hand. Well, I'll be damned, he muttered, pulling himself out. He wiped his hands on an already filthy rag and stared at the alien drive core with a look of pure, unadulterated reverence. Find something, Pops? Mara asked, leaning against a bulkhead, datapad in hand. Something? Pop's voice cracked with emotion. Mara, they didn't just build a good engine. They built a classic. Look at this plasma manifold. The fusion regulation. It's all based on the old XR70 standard. Mara raised an eyebrow. The XR70? The one we abandoned 60 years ago because it was too bulky and power-hungry? Power-hungry my ass, Pop shot back, jabbing a greasy finger at her. She was over-engineered, but she was durable. You could fix an XR70 with a hammer and a bad attitude. These Selim took that reliable old workhorse and built a masterpiece on top of it. It's like finding a pristine 1969 Mustang in a barn on Proxima Centauri. He patted the conduit lovingly. We can fix this. Hell, we can make it better. Mara's thin smile returned. Better, you say? That sounds like we might be exceeding the contract. Damn right we are, Pops growled. These people got shot up protecting folks. The contract can go straight to hell. The exceeding of the contract began less than 12 hours later. Fiora was awakened from a deep, coffee-induced sleep by a horrendous screeching sound from outside her assigned quarters. She rushed to the viewport and stared in utter disbelief. The air in the docking bay, which yesterday had carried the clean scent of sterile filters, was now thick with the acrid bite of solder, hot metal, and the ever-present, defiant aroma of brewing coffee. Huge, automated welders were crawling over the graceful hull of the Saffron Gale, stitching thick, ugly slabs of gray metal onto its skin. She stormed out into the docking bay, her formal composure shattering. What is the meaning of this? She demanded, confronting Mara, who was calmly directing the chaos from a mobile command platform. Morning, Captain, Mara said, now looking up from her datapad. We're reinforcing the hull. Found some surplus armor plating from a decommissioned asteroid hauler. Figured you could use it. This is a medical frigate, not a brute, Fiora protested. It is designed for speed and grace, to be a symbol of life, not a fortress. A symbol of life doesn't do much good when it's vented to vacuum, Mara said flatly. This'll add a few tons, but Pops is tweaking your inertial dampeners to compensate. You won't even notice. A harried-looking Thelem officer, Fiora's first mate Torvin, rushed over, followed by a bewildered-looking human in the crisp uniform of the Armstrong Station Authority. Captain, they're refusing to stop! Torvin trilled, his feathers ruffled in agitation. Ma'am Solberg, I have to insist, the station official said, his voice strained. This is a gross overreach of your contractual obligations. You were hired for repairs, not a complete military refit. Mara finally looked up from her pad, her expression one of polite boredom. Refit? Mr. Henderson, please. This is a proactive structural integrity enhancement. It's right here in the work order addendum I filed this morning. Subsection C, paragraph 12. Contractor will take all necessary measures to ensure vessel survivability against potential future environmental hazards. She tapped her datapad, and a screen flickered to life in front of the official, displaying a wall of dense, unreadable text. Henderson's eyes glazed over. But asteroid hauler plating? Excellent protection against micrometeoroids, Mara said smoothly, which are, as you know, a significant environmental hazard. It's for their own safety. Are you suggesting we compromise the safety of our clients? The official sputtered. Buried under a mountain of bureaucratic nonsense, he looked from Mara's implacable face to the screeching welders to Fiora's horrified expression, and simply wilted. "Carry on," he mumbled, and scurried away. Mara gave Fiora a look. See? Triplicate. If the chaos in the hangar was overwhelming, the chaos in the ship's computer core was sublime. Tina Ito sat cross-legged in a nest of makeshift cabling. Her fingers tapped and swiped across a holographic interface, calling up and dismissing data streams. The Thelum mainframe was elegant, honeycombed, and, to her, achingly boring. Its security was robust but predictable. "Okay, you dignified old fossil," she muttered to the glowing arrays. "Time for a little anarcho-syndicalist upgrade." She had, in Mara's words, requisitioned a crate of commercial smart home devices, a retired server bank from the station's obsolete network, and, for reasons that were clear only to her, a robotic floor vacuum. With a manic grin, she began weaving them together, lashing their processing power into a single cohesive whole, and then injecting it into the Saffron Gale's secondary systems like a virus. She wasn't building a true AI. That was illegal, immoral, and way above her pay grade. She was building a virtual intelligence, a VI, a glorified task runner with a personality matrix scraped from a dozen different user-friendly consumer products. A final line of code slid into place. The robotic vacuum on the floor whirred to life, its little blue light blinking. A pleasant, synthesized female voice, the kind you'd hear from a coffee maker or a self-driving car, filled the small room. "Hello," it said, its tone relentlessly cheerful. "System integration is complete. My designation is Sheila. How can I help you make your day more streamlined and productive? Would you like me to order more paper towels?" Tina cackled with glee. "Sheila, run a diagnostic on the port side plasma relays and cross-reference the power fluctuations with POP's output readings from the main core." "Certainly," Sheila replied. "Processing. Power fluctuations are within expected parameters for a jury-rigged XR70 fusion core being pushed to 140% of its manufacturer-rated capacity. I have also detected a sale on bulk nutrient paste at the station commissary. Shall I add it to your cart?" Fiora stood on the observation deck overlooking the docking bay, watching the slow, brutal transformation of her ship. The elegant lines of the Saffron Gale were disappearing under slabs of ugly, functional armor. The sounds of welding and riveting were incessant. Humans swarmed over her vessel like ants, each one moving with a frantic, focused energy she couldn't comprehend. They weren't just repairing her ship. They were remaking it in their own image. Stubborn, loud, and brutally practical. She felt a wave of despair wash over her. This wasn't help. This was a violation. A gentle presence beside her. Mateo. He held out a fresh mug of coffee without a word. She took it, the warmth a small anchor in her sea of confusion. "It is a lot," he said softly, following her gaze. "They are destroying my ship," Fiora said, her voice tight. "They're turning a symbol of healing into a weapon." Mateo looked at her, his eyes full of a deep, uncomplicated empathy. "I saw the casualty reports from your fleet. I saw the state your crew was in when you arrived. You look like you carry the weight of a whole world, Captain. And that's because you do, don't you? The people on this ship, the ones you couldn't save, the ones you still have to." He gestured with his own mug towards the bustling humans below. "They see a ship that needs to survive, so they're giving it teeth, because they looked at you and they saw someone who saves people, And now they want to save you. His words were simple, devoid of formality or guile. They were just true. And that simple, unadorned truth cut through layers of her Thelem reserve, her military discipline, her weary pride. It broke her. A single hot tear traced a path down her feathered cheek. She didn't wipe it away. For the first time, she felt not just rescued, but seen. She found Mara in the makeshift command center, a chaotic mess of screens and empty coffee cups.
"Commander Solberg,"
Fiora said, her voice steady now.
"I must speak with you in private."
Mara looked up, surprised by the new tone of resolve in the alien captain's voice. She nodded and led her to a small storage closet, pulling the heavy, sound-dampening door almost shut behind them, leaving just a crack of light and sound in the gloom.
"My mission was not simply to escape the hegemony,"
Fiora began, the words coming in a rush now that the dam was broken.
"My fleet. We were a screen. We were trying to protect a civilian evacuation route from the Viridia system."
Mara's face was grim.
"Viridia. I've seen the hegemony declarations. They've marked it for aesthetic purification."
A euphemism for genocide.
"There is a small colony on Viridia 3,
Fiora continued, her voice dropping to a pained whisper.
"A home for children, orphans of this war. 312 of them with their caretakers. The Saffron Gale was their designated transport. We were supposed to get them out before the hegemony fleet arrived to blockade the system."
She looked at Mara, her eyes pleading.
"The hegemony blockade is now in place. I've monitored their communications. The purification is scheduled to begin in 9 standard days."
Mara processed this, her expression unreadable. She ran the calculations in her head. The travel time, the state of the ship, the opposition. Her face tightened into a deep frown.
"It's not enough time," she said,
the words falling like stones in the small room.
"Even with our repairs, breaking a full fleet blockade with a medical frigate, it's a suicide mission."
The words hung in the air, leaking through the crack in the door. Pops Braddock, leaning against the nearby bulkhead to catch his breath after hauling a new power converter halfway across the bay, caught the last two. Suicide mission? The door to the storage closet flew open, slamming against the bulkhead. Pops stood there, brandishing a massive, 2-meter-long torque wrench like a scepter. His face was flushed, his eyes blazing with a righteous fire. "It'll have to be enough time," he snapped at Mara, his voice a low growl. He then rounded on Fiora, but his expression wasn't angry. It was fierce, protective. "Suicide mission? The hell it is! Not on my watch, Captain. Not while I'm drawing breath." He turned away from them, facing the entire docking bay. The sounds of work faltered as dozens of volunteer engineers, welders, and technicians turned to look at him. He raised the wrench high in the air, a gnarled, grease-stained prophet on a mount of spare parts. "Listen up," he bellowed, his voice echoing through the vast space. "I don't care what command tells you this is. I don't care what the contract says. This is a goddamn rescue mission. The lady of this fine vessel just told the boss that there are 300 kids on a rock about to be glassed by those shiny bastards in the pretty ships. They were counting on this ship to get them out." A murmur went through the crowd. Faces hardened, jaws set. "I said it's a goddamn rescue mission." He slammed the wrench down on a crate for emphasis, the clang ringing like a bell. "You don't need permission to be a hero. You need a wrench. You need guts. You need to get your asses in gear. This ain't a repair job anymore. It's a rescue. Now get back to work." A beat of stunned silence. Then, a single welder raised his torch. "For the kids!" he roared. The cry was taken up by another and another until the entire bay was filled with a deafening chorus of defiance. The frantic pace of work doubled. The sound of tools and machinery became a war drum, a symphony of righteous indignation. Fiora retreated from the raw, explosive display of human emotion, her heart hammering against her ribs. She found a quiet corner in the transformed medbay, the scent of coffee a strange comfort in her turmoil. They were turning her ship into a warship. They were preparing for violence, for battle, in the name of saving children. Was this not a betrayal of everything the Thelem stood for? Their core tenet, hard-won over centuries of their own bloody history, was pacifism. A medical officer did no harm. How could she lead this ironclad beast into a fight? Mateo found her there. He didn't speak, just sat with her, his presence a calm island in her storm. "They mean to fight," she said finally, her voice hollow. "They are filled with such rage. I am a healer, Mateo. I have sworn an oath. By allowing this, am I not breaking that oath? Am I betraying my people's deepest principles?" Mateo looked at her, his expression serious, but still kind. "Capitan, my grandfather used to say that when a wolf is coming for the sheep, the shepherd shows compassion by building a stronger fence, not by reasoning with the wolf." He gestured vaguely towards the roaring activity in the bay. "You are a healer. You protect life. Right now, 300 young lives are in the path of a monster. The most compassionate, the most profoundly healing thing you can do for a child in the path of that monster is to build a wall between them." He gave a small, sad smile. "Your wall just happens to have thrusters and a plasma cannon." Fiora looked down at her hands. A wall, not a weapon of aggression, but a shield of protection. The reframing was painful, a violation of her beliefs, but the truth of it settled in her heart with an undeniable leaden weight. A grim, necessary resolve hardened within her. There was no debate. There was no committee meeting. There was only the unified, unspoken consensus of the human volunteers. The job had changed. Fiora watched it happen from the observation deck, a silent, stunned observer. She didn't know where the new people came from. One moment, the docking bay was filled with Mara's team and station contractors. The next, after Pop's speech, it was populated by grim-faced men and women with old military tattoos and an unnerving level of competence. A stoic, powerfully built man with the words Semper Fi tattooed on his neck quietly and efficiently began setting up a tactical overlay on one of Mara's main screens. That was Dorn, a wry, silver-haired woman who moved with the easy confidence of a lifelong pilot, was suddenly in the Gale's cockpit, running simulations with Tina. That was Lena, a retired long-haul cargo freighter captain who'd heard there was an interesting gig on the station grapevine. They didn't ask for permission. They saw a job that needed doing, and did it. Mara stood on her command platform, watching them all. She turned to Fiora, who had returned to the command platform, her posture straighter, her eyes clear and determined. "Captain," Mara said, her voice formal but with an undercurrent of deep respect. "It seems you have a volunteer gunship detail." Fiora nodded slowly. "It seems I do." Mara stared out at the ship, at her people working with a furious purpose she knew all too well. She spoke again, her voice quieter, almost to herself. "We had our own cleansings on our world. Different names, different flags, same ugly results. We learned a hard lesson a long time ago." She finally met Fiora's gaze, her own eyes dark with ancestral memory.
We learned what happens when you stand by and do nothing.
The final preparations were a blur of frantic, purposeful work. The last of the armor plates, ugly and functional, was welded into place over the Saffron Gale's bow. It completely ruined the ship's graceful aesthetic, turning it into a blunt instrument. Tina, never one to leave well enough alone, had commandeered the ship's high-focus medical laser etcher, a device normally used for microsurgery, with a few frantic modifications and a lot of bypassed safety safeguards. She calibrated it into a massive engraving tool. "What are you doing, Glitch?" Pops yelled over the comms from the engine room. "You're gonna drain power from my ignition sequence."
Art is important for morale, Pops,
she yelled back, her face illuminated by the glow of her console.
And this is a masterpiece.
On the bow of the ship, just below the bridge, the laser began to carve. It etched huge, blocky letters into the new gray armor plating. When it was finished, a new name, a new declaration of purpose, was emblazoned on the vessel for all to see. "Hands off our nurses."
All systems nominal.
Sheila's cheerful voice announced on the bridge.
Well, nominal is a subjective term, given that 27% of the ship's current operational status is dependent on technology sourced from consumer-grade kitchen appliances. But all lights are green.
Fiora stood at her captain's station and surveyed her new bridge. The elegant integrated Thelum honeycomb displays were still there, but now they were surrounded by human additions. A clunky, practical monitor displaying the ship's external sensor feed was zip-tied to a support strut. Scuff marks marred the once pristine deck plates. A dark, ring-shaped stain from a coffee cup was already permanently etched onto the console of Dorn's new weapons station. It was a violation of design principles, a chaotic fusion of grace and grit. It was perfect. "Engine core is green and mean," Pop's voice crackled over the comm. "She's purring like a kitten. A very angry, very large, plasma-spitting kitten." "Go get him, folks," Mateo reported from the galley, his voice a warm reassurance. "Go get him, folks." Fiora took a deep breath. Her ship felt alive. It felt like a clenched fist.
Lena,
she said, her voice ringing with newfound authority.
"Take us out." "You got it, Captain,"
Lena said with a grin.
"Hold on to your feathers."
With a roar that shook the entire docking bay, the newly christened Saffron Gale lifted from its cradle. It pivoted, its movements surprisingly agile, and shot out of the bay doors, leaving behind a stunned station command, a mountain of confusing paperwork, and the lingering, defiant smell of coffee. The jump was instantaneous and jarring. One moment they were in the empty space near Earth's moon, the next they were in the Viridia system, and the view screen was filled with beauty and menace. The Viridia star cast a golden light on a dozen ships, all sleek, sharp, and gleaming. Hegemony vessels. They were arranged in a perfect, aesthetically pleasing blockade pattern around the third planet. A comm request blinked on Fiora's console. She nodded at Mara. A face appeared on the main screen. He was Thelum, but one twisted by the Hegemony's obsession with genetic purity. His features were too sharp, too symmetrical, his feathers an unnatural, brilliant white. He looked at the Saffron Gale with an expression of profound disgust. "This is Prefect Coridian of the Hegemony Purification Fleet," he said, his voice a silken, condescending drawl. "I am addressing the pilot of the junk heap that has just befouled my star space. Identify yourself and your purpose for bringing this ill-conceived monstrosity into my presence." Mara leaned forward and keyed the microphone. Her reply was flat, cold, and utterly devoid of negotiation.
"We're the school bus,"
she said. "Move." Caridian laughed, a short, ugly bark of contempt. Eliminate this filth. The hegemony ships moved as one, their movements exact and predictable, like a choreographed dance of death. They fired, beams of coherent energy lacing through the dark. But the Saffron Gale was not a dancer. It was a drunken brawler.
Evasive pattern Delta 5,
Mara yelled.
Lena, make us ugly. Ugly is my specialty.
Lena cackled, throwing the ship into a wild, stomach-churning corkscrew. The energy beams sliced through the space where they had been a second before. The ship groaned under the strain, but the asteroid hauler armor held.
Sheila,
Mara commanded.
give them something to think about.
Certainly, Sheila's pleasant voice replied.
Hijacking local communication frequencies. Broadcasting Baby Shark on a loop at maximum volume. Interspersed with randomized garbage data packets compiled from Earth's 21st century internet forums. This should prove vexing.
On the bridge of the Hegemony flagship, Prefect Caridian coiled. For a moment, he was certain he was having a catastrophic brain aneurysm. The sounds were a saccharine, mind-numbing assault. But the data packets were worse. His pristine, minimalist screen showing ship positions was suddenly flooded with images of Terran felines in absurd poses, recipes for something called deep-fried butter, and political arguments from 3 centuries prior. The assault was less a military attack and more a migraine given physical form. They're barbarians, Caridian hissed, clutching his head as his disciplined, orderly fleet, used to silent, coordinated perfection, was thrown into chaos. Pilots were distracted, comm officers were frantic, and their perfect arrangement of ships began to fray at the edges. They're open, Dorn called, his voice unnervingly calm. Got a firing solution on that lead cruiser's shield generator. Request permission to fire main cannons? Theora looked at the sensor feed. The ugly armor, the chaotic maneuvers, the sheer audacity. It was working. Mateo's words echoed in her mind. A wall with thrusters and a plasma cannon.
Permission granted, Mr. Dorn,
she said.
Fire at will.
2 newly installed plasma cannons roared to life. Unlike the elegant lances of the hegemony, the bolts of energy were brutal, booming blasts that slammed into the enemy's cruiser shields, making it shudder violently. The dance had turned into a fistfight. They were taking hits now. Alarms screamed through the bridge. Starboard shields are failing, Dorn announced. Weapons are down for recharge cycle. A hegemony battlecruiser, its commander having recovered from the sonic assault, saw the opening. It pivoted, its main weapon port glowing with imminent death. It had them. A clean, perfect shot.
I can't shake him, Captain,
Lena yelled, her knuckles white on the controls.
Tina, what are you doing?
Mari yelled, her eyes wide with alarm as a new icon appeared on the sensor feed. An external biosign on the hull.
Get back inside. That's an order. Can't,
a voice screamed over the internal comms, crackling with static and sheer adrenaline. It was Tina.
Glitch, how are you patched into the command channel from out there?
Mara demanded, incredulous.
I hotwired my suit comm to the ship's Wi-Fi. Duh. Now shut up. I'm working.
Tina yelled back.
I'm routing the main core through the comm dish's waveguide emitter. It'll either work or vaporize the whole bow. 50-50.
On the main view screen, the tiny figure in a bulky, mismatched vacuum suit was scrambling across the bow of the ship. She climbed onto the massive main communications dish, which was now pointed directly at the hegemony cruiser, and straddled it like a wild animal. Wires and power conduits, hastily rerouted, snaked from the dish's core into a jury-rigged power pack on her back. On the bridge of the hegemony cruiser, the gunnery officer stared at his targeting screen, his finger hovering over the firing stud. He saw the shot. It was perfect. But he also saw a small, pink-haired creature rodeo-riding a comms dish. His military academy had not prepared him for this. The sheer, unadulterated insanity of the act made him hesitate for one fatal second. Fiora saw it all on her sensor feed. The incoming killing blow, the desperate, insane plan of her human engineer. In that instant, her transformation was complete. She had become a commander.
Lena, hold our position for 3 seconds,
Fiora commanded, her voice cutting through the panic on the bridge.
Captain, they'll kill us,
Mara protested.
Give her the shot,
Fiora ordered, her eyes locked on the screen. Lena obeyed instantly, steadying the ship. That was all Tina needed. She slapped a large, red button on her wrist-mounted control pad.
Yeet this blast, you glitter fascists!
She shrieked, her voice a distorted burst of pure, gleeful defiance. The communications dish, never designed for such a purpose, bucked violently. A colossal, unstable, and utterly devastating beam of raw plasma, a coherent blast of overcharged data and pure energy, erupted from its center. The beam was no focused strike. It was a shotgun blast of cosmic rage. The beam slammed into the hegemony cruiser, gutting it from bow to stern. The enemy ship split in two, its internal explosions silenced by the vacuum of space. The hegemony fleet was in utter disarray. Their perfect arrangement of ships was broken. Their flagship was battling a recursive loop of infantile music, and one of their cruisers had just been annihilated by a maniac on a satellite dish. The disciplined order of the hegemony had no procedure for this level of sheer, unadulterated chaos.
That's our gap,
Mara roared.
Lena, punch it! Full thrust!
The saffron gale surged forward, smashing through the hole in the enemy line. It ignored the sporadic panic fire from the other ships and dove into the atmosphere of Viridia 3. The landing was less a controlled descent and more a controlled crash. The ship skidded to a halt in a cloud of dust and steam just a few hundred meters from the orphanage, a collection of simple, low-slung domes. The main ramp slammed down before the ship had even fully stopped.
Go, go, go!
Mara's voice boomed over the ship's external speakers.
You have 10 minutes.
The evacuation was frantic, desperate, and beautiful. Thelum caretakers, tears of terror and hope streaming down their faces, guided streams of children, dozens of different species, all shapes and sizes, up the ramp. Mateo was at the top, handing out nutrient bars and warm blankets, his calm presence a beacon in the storm. Pops was at the bottom, directing traffic and physically lifting smaller children into the ship. They moved in a whirlwind, every action purposeful. In 9 minutes and 46 seconds, 312 children and their 20 caretakers were aboard.
They're all on,
Mateo yelled.
Liftoff!
The gale shuddered as it rose, just as the first beams of the regrouping hegemony fleet began to scorch the ground where the orphanage had stood. The ship clawed its way back into orbit, weathering another volley of fire, its new armor groaning but holding.
Tina, I need the FTL online now,
Fiora commanded.
Give me a sec, Captain. Sheila's rerouting power from the, toaster.
Tina's voice panted over the comm.
Okay, we're good. Hit it.
Lena slammed her palm on the jump drive activation. The stars outside the view screen twisted, warped, and then vanished, replaced by the swirling, peaceful colors of hyperspace. They were safe. Weeks later, the Saffron Gale was docked at a hidden refugee nebula, a secret haven for the displaced and the hunted. It had become a legend. Its ugly, patched hull and the defiant slogan on its bow had become a symbol of hope. Fiora stood in the main cargo bay, which had been converted into a temporary playground. The air was filled with the sound of children's laughter, a sound she had thought she might never hear again. She watched them play, their past trauma already beginning to recede in the face of safety and care. Mara came and stood beside her, holding out a datapad.
You should see this,
she said quietly. On the screen, a system-wide broadcast from Seoul was playing. It showed a simple image, a slowly rotating blue and white marble of a planet. A calm, resolute human voice, a woman's voice, spoke over the image. It was being translated and rebroadcast across all refugee networks.
"This is Earth, the blue dot in the forgotten sector,"
the voice said, steady and clear.
"We have remained silent for a long time. We have our own ghosts, our own history. But we have learned that silence in the face of tyranny is a crime. We have heard stories of an organization that values aesthetics over life, one that cleanses what it deems imperfect."
The camera zoomed in on the planet.
"Let this be our only message. While we do not seek conflict, and we are not conquerors, to those who would bring war to the innocent, who would harm children in the name of purity, know this: we will damn well finish it."
The broadcast ended. Fiora looked at Mara, her heart full of a feeling she couldn't name. It was gratitude, awe, and a little bit of terror, all mixed together. Across the hidden networks of the Thelum Alliance and beyond, a new phrase was spreading like wildfire, whispered in hushed, hopeful tones from one struggling outpost to the next. It was the answer to the question, what happens when you ask the humans for help? The answer was always the same. They give you coffee, upgrades, and a gunship detail.